bad you're not available for digging purposes this summer.
Oh, well, I can get to Canada. I can get up there if I just gotta.
I have to wait for the water to go down to be able to proceed in my search to a point further than I am now. As it stands now, there are two key words that you should put in your memory.
Mm-hmm.
One is the religion of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, which was called Aten. In using the code, excuse me, Aten, by moving the A in, and by considering that an N and an M are the same letter, Aten meant team, T-E-A-M. It's important to know as well that the first three letters are used to describe a beverage had at 4 o'clock in the afternoon by a whole bunch of people with connections to England.
Yeah.
Tea time.
Mm-hmm.
And that those 4 letters appear in the symbols of typefaces upside down. TEA are all pictured upside down in the symbols. Why they don't do the rest of the 26 becomes the question. What's not there is more important than what is, but what is those 3 letters, T, and I suggest the last letter becomes an M, and therefore the religion is building a team. And I would suggest to you that how you build a team is by controlling the genetic pool. And you manufacture the people on your team if what you need is a space program. And what you are in is the 2nd century AD, saying to yourself, okay, I have 1,800 years to go, and I want to get a space program by that time. What do I need? And you would code the word Aten, which basically becomes team. And how you do it is you gather up all the information on genetic engineering held by the Amen priests of Egypt, and you say, let my people go. And knowing that they will follow the people that leave and check up on them, they follow Moses into the desert for 40 years and keep track of everything he does, while silently his wife sneaks off and establishes herself in what was before it was called Israel, was Canaan, and begins the process of raising genetically engineered children that in 40 years will provide the team.
And that team is if it's from the women's side, it would be, I guess, what, Amazonian or Grey Nuns?
They would be what we would call today, or they would call then, about what they were making for today, women, or the best of women. And the language we use now for the best woman is Aten.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that means that over the last 1,800 years, they have managed to make a gene pool of women, Atens, and place them into the gene pool which became North Africa and Europe, Morocco being a good example of North Africa, and then merge them into the populations of Spain, Portugal, France, Holland, Belgium, and eventually into Scandinavia and Russia, with their headquarters being Frankland, Germany. And the penultimate group, which is always the most important, became the Franks, Gaullists. That country is called France. There you have a continent making the gene pool, Europe, sending the best and brightest ones to North America. And needed down the line would be a merger into the people they had as originals, the Africans. So therefore they invent the story of slavery and send people to North America to be slaves for the first 150 years, and then begin to merge them into the population so that their genes added to the genes of Caucasian group that they sent from Europe, and added to by the Grey Nuns when they got here, and the Blue Nuns, the Carmelites of Germany, who moved to Jerusalem to control the holy sites. All of it working together gave them a team of people called Aten. The other thing they gave them was a means by which to destroy this team in the end, so that the gene pool could not be traced back to Jerusalem. And since many of the people that they sent over to watch over this Caucasian team were in fact Roma, otherwise known as Indians, again, the gene pool could be traced back to its original site of India, and a need would arise to get rid of as many of them as possible. So by keeping them poor as they had done to Africans. They were able to manage them on reserves and reservations, and a population of women with that gene pool in them would have to, at one time, be decimated so that they not be around when people find out that they were, in fact, a gene pool made for the task. And today there was an announcement by the RCMP that the murdered and missing women from the, what they call, Aboriginal community today is listed at something like 1,180 women were murdered or have disappeared and are suspected to have been murdered. They, 1,180 some, basically come from a population of Native people that makes up 4% of the Canadian population and 16% of the Native or Aboriginal population. So they are being killed at a rate of 4 times more than Caucasians. Even though the number of Caucasians would be greater, it's simply because they have a bigger percentage. But as percentage of the numbers being killed, Native women are 16% are being killed. Somebody's out there doing a triage, cull of Native women because of their DNA.
That seems to be the case. I think when I spoke to you last time, they've been doing...
I can't hear you.
I think when I spoke to you last time, that's what they've been doing all around the world is cleaning up.
They're doing it in Syria.
Yeah.
They're doing it in Nigeria. They've just done it by sinking a ship in Korea.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And right now there's a whole bunch of men being killed in Turkey, which would be a center of gene pool activity.
Definitely, because Turkey...
country just above Syria. Now, if you read the Bible and you get down to Aaron's rod, when Moses asked, "Let my people go," he turned to his brother and told him to throw his rod on the ground. And the ground, once the rod was thrown on the ground, it changed into a serpent. Now, a serpent is the coded concept of something that wiggles and wriggles on the floor. And the equivalent of the serpent that wiggles and wriggles is electricity.
Yeah.
And when they went to take Joshua to Jericho, they told him to walk around the city 7 days, 7 times in 7 days. But on the 7th day, to walk 7 times on that day. So that's what was done, and what happened? The walls came a-crumbling down. So what they were doing was saying, there's a code out there, and that code is the destruction of something we want to collapse is in our hands, and therefore we got to give that capability a number, and we'll call it a number 7. And that means to alter, because if you put 2 7s back to back, you're making an alter. So you're changing what is by causing it to collapse. Now, how can you do that? With the concept of a rod. A rod, by the way, has collapsed this baseball season. He's been suspended from the New York Yankees. There was a horse in the Kentucky Derby called General A-Rod, and he came in close to the last position in the race. Middle, someplace around the middle going towards the rear. A-Rod comes from the name of the general who wanted to kill all the boys of Israel, called Herod. E-Rod. So obviously, A-Rod has to be linked to something that involves electricity and causes collapse.
I would think that I don't know. I'm just guessing CERN, maybe. I don't know. Maybe CERN.
I can't hear you.
I was thinking maybe CERN. You know, something maybe that
much closer to home than that. When houses were built and electricity was placed in the house originally, there was a problem that came up at a later date that caused them to have to add a wire into the connection of positive and negative. And that wire is called a ground. The ground comes out of the electrical panel and travels down the earth beneath or underneath the house and is attached to a lightning rod. That lightning rod is supposed to allow any surplus charge flowing into the house to make its way back into the ground without affecting any of the appliances or tools within the building. However, if at the end of a rod in the ground you attach a magnet, you then are creating what is known as an electromagnet. Magnet which is turned on by a surcharge of electricity that comes from the rod. The rod should be approximately 5 feet long. Magnet attached at the bottom and the wire from the house attached at the top create what is known by a guy named Faraday, which has in the middle of it a rod, if you consider that one of the A's, alpha to omega, can be an O, a rod, Faraday.
Yeah.
Once you attach the two things together, you have an electromagnet. And an electromagnet searches for things it can affect invisibly through a process called magnetism. It cannot function properly unless it's surrounded by water. So at the base of a house, on the pretext that it is needed to move water away from the foundation, one has created the perfect setup for a magnetic field. In this case, electromagnetic field. You read in physics about electromagnetic fields, it talks about how the electricity charges the magnet and the magnet charges the electricity. And if you contain it in water underneath a very thick wall of rebarred concrete, what you're doing is building this field's power. And as it seeps out, if you've arranged it properly, it will seep into a basement window or out of the floor. And anything living in the basement will be affected by the magnetic field, since iron is part and parcel of the construction of a human being. And most of it arrives in water. That's why taps cause sinks to turn yellow, or toilets in places where the water is not filtered in the same manner as they are in major cities. So you have a human being who builds a man cave in a basement, goes there as often as possible, and since in a cold country it means probably 8 months of the year, you have, in fact, a tugging on that male every time he goes in the basement without knowing what's happening. Internally, his parts are being pulled at, which would, in fact, cause breakages and the movement of parts of the body down further and closer to the floor. The obvious part would be that the scrotum would become elongated and parts of the body, which should be higher in the stomach, end up in the scrotum, which has an effect on sex drive by making it impossible for the normal activity in the scrotum to take place. And thus the need for a special pill that can at one time provide an erection of 4 hours or less, but can at the same time make you blind. In a lot of people who don't have a scrotum, called women, the net effect would be to drag the human body down further and further closer to the floor, and that, of course, would have an effect on breasts, hanging down more. But also, in both male and female, there is a malady called depression. Depression means dragging down. And people say, I couldn't get out of bed today. I didn't feel like I could just even slide off the bed. So, to make a long story short, a company with the name Rod in it can, in fact, install a rod next to the building that is being erected and run a wire through to the electricity. Thus, pre-plan the death of the occupants. Another thing that can happen when you mix electric circuit with water and a magnet is an explosion and a fire. Think of 9/11. Think of airplanes burning with their flames going up. But what is coming down the building is water. Think of it gathering up in the basement and creating the necessary parts of an electromagnet. Think of an explosion and watch how it vaporizes the base so that the building, like the walls of Jericho, comes crumbling down. Well, it can be done in a bungalow. It can be done in a duplex. It can be done in an apartment building. It can be done in an office building. Each floor itself can create a magnet which affects the movement of cells within the body. Everything linked to the nervous system is electrical. And a magnet pulls on electricity. And electricities pull on magnets depending on which end is together. Either if you put the two similar ends together, they reject each other. If you put negative and positive, they attract each other. So think of the damage a company with the name Rod in it, who has the authority to set up such a network, has, is, and will kill millions that company's name is Hydro.
With the fire.
Now, let me tell you what happened a few million years ago. An accumulation of iron from more than likely a volcano from below or a meteor from above was assembled in a place which happens to be on the boundary between Canada and the United States, later became known as the Great Lakes. The largest accumulation of iron in the world sits today under an American state called Michigan. Therefore, being two peninsulas, both could be destroyed by an explosion coming from below, known to most people as a blind thrust, a vertical earthquake caused by an explosion. Should it happen to the southern peninsula of the United States state of Michigan, it would mean the state would be destroyed by the explosion. However, should it happen under the northern peninsula of the state called Michigan, added to the destruction of the peninsula is the breaking of the barrier that holds back Lake Superior. So there you go. Out of all of that stuff in the Bible coded to mean something other than what the words say, the code suggests that they built societies and placed their gene pools under national designations around the world. And in each brought in the gene pools necessary to accomplish the tasks designated to that location, and made certain that the one that provided the most important task, getting off the planet and out into the universe via the Oort cloud, that population, once its shelf life had expired, could be wiped out by simply pressing a button that would, in fact, ignite the electromagnetic field, specifically in a time of the year when large volumes of water were running in that direction. Number 7, altar. Destroy women. They did that and marked the day they did the last ones by saying that Pluto was no longer a planet, and therefore women no longer existed. Then they move on to say, now that we've got a team of women in place, let's handle them and get rid of them at the same time, now that they've done the work that needed to be done. Let's get rid of these women at the same time as women at a time between 2011 and 2062, making sure that that 50 years is the last year of this female genetic pool. And finally saying, well, now that neither one of them is needed, woman or women, because it's not completely technologically precise enough for a journey into space, we'll need a little break to think about what we do next to the gene pool. Let's get rid of the male. Frosty the Snowman, the number 8, represents the male, and heat represents the meltdown, and the prevention of birth of males has to be the means of destruction. And from 7 comes 11. So it means that the numbers which represent the tasks to be done, from the original 0 to the 1, which is the cosmetic leader, to the one who actually does the bulwark, the job, 3, the financier and creator of genetic engineering, pair of boobs on a 3, the nuns, 4, the church and the secret societies that do the background work, 5, the Navy that gathers up all of the information in Maryland and stores it there for the future, and 6, future woman, the genetically engineered upside-down copy of a 9 called equilibrium.
Yeah.
Will rule in the future. And therefore, 7's job is simply to make changes occur when they're needed. Right now, we're facing the destruction of human beings by murder, by mass murder, and by gene pool elimination on the whole. Genetics becomes suicidal, and death comes in the murder of gene pools. Genocide, suicide, company that sets up the network, Hydro, is assisted in distributing the magnetism throughout the house by a company called Bell, because the telephone lines are carrying an electrical circuit as well. So when the power goes off at Hydro, your phone that's plugged into the wall, not the ones that are basically on a radio wave, the original one close to the wall functions so that you can call Bell Canada and tell them, or call Hydro and tell them. B&H, Bell and Hydro.
You know, it's funny, B&H is actually a company, a media
I beg your pardon?
B&H is actually a video company. They sell like media products for people who like to shoot video.
They also run the grocery store in downtown Kempville called B&H. Don't forget that in the middle of the B&H is A&D. A&D is DNA.
Yeah, and they're in Manhattan. They're based in Manhattan, and it's all Hasidic Jews who.
Now they need the property, so what they do is erratic billing structures with a bunch of greasy pigs put on the telephone lines to answer people's questions by not answering anything.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, according to the ombudsman of the government of Ontario, there are 3 going on 4,000 homes in eastern Ontario, which is right here, who have filed complaints with the government that Hydro is, in fact, doing erratic billing and raising the price of Hydro double, triple, quadruple, whatever is needed, all of which means that those people who can't afford to pay will then be put on a lien situation against their mortgage, and at the proper time, the Hydro company can apply to the courts to take possession of the property, since they, of course, will need them to house the million or so immigrants that will run to Canada after Michigan kills 100 million, 150 million people in their neighborhoods. I filed the court documents for the Pineal Court to be prepared. And everyone who has employment in Hydro, in Bell Canada, in the police department, OPP, in the insurance industry, as the main co-conspirators, and then a whole series of people classified as unindicted co-conspirators. In other words, when the time comes and they've dealt with the bigger groups, these are the people that made it possible for Hydro, Bell, the insurance industry, and the police to work together, cause the death of individuals, short-term and long-term. You can create Alzheimer's from depression, all kinds of senility, to mass murders of 30 people, 40 people, 300 people, like you have with the airplane 777 and the ferry from Korea and the mines in Turkey and all of that. But eventually, the mass genocide of people all are their responsibility. In those four groups, anyone who has control over the telephone or the mail or the internet and has been culling telephone calls or mail or files or whatever, they too will be included with the management at trial. The problem that exists on the planet is that the people who one should be able to go to file these charges are all criminals. Yeah. And therefore, the solution has to be bigger, better, highest power rather than the higher power.
You know, I from listening to you and Dana were talking not too long ago, there was a guy you mentioned, I think his name was Herb or something like that?
Yeah. Herb Gray.
Herb Gray, yeah. For a guy even beyond death, but
beyond any worth to the ongoing of humanity.
Yeah, but even beyond death, this guy will still protect the system.
Yeah,
that's kind of scary, Glenn. That's
yeah.
How is that possible?
Well, they know that if left to the system, their DNA would be used to make more descendants, another generation. That's why creation has such a problem making the decision that, you know, if you allow the mass murder by those people I've just described as the people who are doing it, you're going to be killed what the media would call innocence. But creation knows that they're not innocents, they are prefabricated criminals who, based upon the existing criminals, are waiting to take their place. And you would only continue the same problem with every generation that comes after. So creation's final decision is it better to stop them from doing what they're doing so that they continue to kill millions of people on the planet? Or is it better to let them do what they're wanting to do, which is the Lou at the Sioux and things like that all over the world, which will at the same time take out a number of quote-unquote innocents? And the decision comes down to, are they innocent or just too young yet to be either stupid, dumbed down, and do all the things they're told to do as receptionists in the government, for example, who misdirect the information so that the real decision makers never get a chance to know what's really happening? Or do you allow them to be included in their leadership's genocide? At least leaving on the planet only those people who have done the least damage. No more hypocrites.
Well, as I see, it's like they're not, for at least most of their lives, if not their whole lives, they're not like in control. Really, I mean, there has to come a point where they become conscious of the reality of everything and all the choices they made. But when I see
a woman that sits in Ogdensburg and tells a client of social services that she knows that the cheapest rent in town is $400, but that she'll only give her $300, is as bad a criminal as a leader who makes decisions for the population they know are self-serving, rather than population serving. So you don't just look for the money or the big boys. You look for the stupid and hypocrites. You know, the word hypocrite comes from hippo, and a hippo is the most hypocritic animal on the planet. It looks like it's just wallowing in water, and yet it can outrun any human being.
Yeah, that's true. And it's probably...
it can come out of the water and chase them down.
And
even if it just sat on them, that would be the end of them. Which they don't do, but...
they're pretty dangerous, though. They're one of the... They can...
In any event, Jared, unless you have something specific you want to add, I got to go do the animals because I've been on with you for about an hour now.
I do want to add something, but I'll save it for next time.
Okay.
All right, Glenn.
Keep on trucking. Bye for now.
You too, Glenn.